Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine, and I'm here today to continue reading Indian No More by Charlene Willing McManis with Traci Sorell. We're going to start again with the acknowledgement that the Portland Public Library is on land that was stolen from the Wabanaki Confederacy, and that the Wabanaki tribes, the tribes that make up the Wabanaki Confederacy, still live in Maine today. And you can find out more information about them at our library or at their sites. This book is published by Lee and Low Books, and we're going to pick up where we left off on Chapter 11, Summer in the City. Figuring out how to be an Indian in the city with no cousins to play with wasn't easy. I missed our adventures through the woods, creeks, and fields back home. At least Pee-wee and I had our new friends, Addie and Keith. And they were about to introduce us to a couple of other kids on our street, Anthony and Philip. Clear skies and a full moon met us out on the street. We walked out towards the corner of Western Avenue and 58th Place. Keith and Addie led the way. Anthony and Philip live up there, Keith said, pointing to a square white house at the end of the block. They moved here before we did. Their last name is Hernandez. They're Cuban. We wandered into the brothers' front yard with rows of kitchen chairs, benches, stools, and a few milk crates lined up in front of a professional-looking puppet theater stand. The sun spotlighted a tall box carved out of dark wood with intricate gold paint designs all around it. The arid wind blew the red velvet curtains and silky tassels. Cuban isn't a tribe either, I take it, I said. Nah, Cuba's an island far away, he said. They speak Spanish there and make cigars. Addie jumped in. Anthony says he misses Cuba a lot, especially his cousins. I understood. I missed mine, too. And Philip says they can never go back home, she added. I was about to ask why, but I realized that I probably knew the answer, too. If it was anything like what happened to us in Grand Ronde, I knew exactly how Anthony felt. They put on good shows, Addie said, looking for a row of empty seats. They do this every summer. They've done a magic show, a circus, and a musical. Anthony, the younger brother, met us and held out his hand to collect admission. A penny each, please. The 2 pennies I'd received from Chich that morning for Pee-wee and me clinked into Anthony's hand on top of Keith's money. Most of the neighborhood kids sat around us. I sat down next to Pee-wee, who sat next to Addie. Anthony and Philip aren't their real names, Addie said. Why not? I asked. Oh, they changed them to make them easier for the teachers to say in school, Keith explained, sitting down next to me. The government made our elders change their names, too. The Indian agent couldn't say them right, I said. What were your real names? Asked Keith. Don't know. It's been since before Chich was born. Maybe even before her parents, since anyone said them. I watched Anthony and Philip bring out paper cups through the front door. So they gave you Petite as your last name? Addie asked. Pee-wee nodded. You know Petite isn't an American name, he said. I shrugged. I didn't know what it was, except not an Umpqua name. Mrs. Hernandez, wearing a nurse's uniform, brought out small brown paper bags full of fresh hot popcorn for everyone in the audience. Mrs. Hernandez was a doctor in Cuba. A really good doctor, too, Addie whispered, continuing her gossip. She's not allowed to doctor here, though. Why not? Pee-wee asked. Mama says because she's a Cuban doctor, not an American doctor. Now she's a nurse, but she still helps everyone on our street. That didn't seem right. Doctors were doctors, period. I noticed some white kids filling the seats. While Philip offered cups and Anthony poured out fruit punch, Mrs. Hernandez passed out the popcorn. She stopped in front of Pee-wee and me. Hola? ¿Hablan español? I leaned back, startled as I took the bag. I'd never heard that language before, and I didn't know what to say. Pee-wee's brow scrunched up. Thank you, I said, hoping that was the right response. Mrs. Hernandez tilted her head, looking at me. Oh, sorry, she said, switching to English. I thought you knew Spanish. She continued giving away popcorn to the rest of the kids. I looked at Keith. He shrugged. I don't know what she said either. He offered. Do I look like someone who knows Spanish? Well, if I didn't know you were Indian, I would say you looked Mexican, and they speak Spanish. California used to be part of Mexico. Then the U.S. and Mexico fought a war, and now it's part of the United States. I nodded like I understood what he was saying. I wondered how many different kinds of people I'd end up meeting in Los Angeles. When everyone finally settled in, the brothers walked behind the theater. Soon the curtains opened. We applauded when the first marionette, a tall Spanish dancer, came on stage. Her beautiful black lace and red silk attire blew in the breeze. She had long eyelashes and full red lips. And as the boys sang, she danced with her wooden high heels clicking. I didn't understand the song, but I liked the melody and the rhythm. The puppet twirled and kicked her leg high. She finished with a split, arms in the air. We applauded again. She bowed and left the stage. The second performer didn't work out as smoothly as the first. They brought out a big black bull with giant horns. He pranced around the stage, pawing at the floor. His large bulk filled the tiny stage. The bull tripped, dangling off the stage. At one point, he ended up with his behind in the air. Everyone howled with laughter. When the bull finally straightened himself out, a small man appeared that Keith told me was called a matador. His outfit was adorned with elaborate trim, black cording, and gold buttons. He held a bright red cape in his tiny hands. He waved the cape, and the audience laughed. The matador was facing the bull's behind. Philip grinned and then twisted the handle to turn the bull around. Now facing the matador, the bull lowered its head and charged. The matador flew up and disappeared off stage. The bull looked around, trotting from one end of the stage to the other. When the matador reappeared, he held a tiny sword in one hand. The matador raised the sword at the bull and faced the audience. He struck the bull on the head with the sword. The bull shook his head and collapsed, his wooden body crashing onto the stage. The matador had knocked the bull out. The audience cheered and applauded. Anthony and Philip came out from behind the theater and took a bow. Afterwards, we were helping the brothers put away everything from the yard. When we were all done, Anthony and Philip began suggesting games that we could play outside. Playing inside someone's house was never an option, even on a hot day. How about war, Philip said, sitting on the edge of his porch. Carl and Debbie also joined us. Debbie lived across the street, and Carl lived next door to the brothers. They seemed a little younger than me and Keith. Carl was white, but I couldn't tell about Debbie. Her hair was light brown and curly, but she actually looked a little like me and Pee-wee. "Nah, we played that last time," said Carl. He picked up an empty bag, wadding it up into a ball, and threw it at Anthony. "How about baseball?" "My mom grounded me for a week after we used her couch cushions for bases," Debbie said. "No way." "I know something way more fun than that," Addie offered. "Regina and Pee-wee have a teepee in their backyard. We could play Cowboys and Indians." "Great," Anthony exclaimed. "We've never had a teepee to play in." Keith checked over the teepee in the backyard and gave it a thumbs up. We constructed a soldier's fort in our front porch using the metal rocker, a card table from Keith's house, and a couple of blankets spread over the top. The teams could run around one end of the house to the other, as well as anywhere on the block between our three families' houses. The prisoners either ended up on our porches, at the fort, or around back inside of our teepee. With everything set up, Philip made all the rules. "The soldiers have the guns, and the Indians have bows and arrows," he declared. I immediately balked. "Indians have guns, you know." I said, "We play Cowboys and Indians back home, too, and all our Indians have guns." "Indians can't have guns because Indians can't win," Philip responded. "What?" I stepped back, hands on my hip. "Indians can't have guns because they automatically are supposed to lose the game?" "Come on, Philip," Keith said, seeing my expression. My face was getting hotter by the minute. "We're playing with real Indians now. Let them have guns." "No, that's not how it works," said Philip. I stood with my arms folded. 6 kids stared at me, including Pee-wee. Apparently no one was going to stand up to Philip. "Come on, Regina," Pee-wee pleaded. "Let's just play it their way." She didn't care if we had guns or not. She just liked playing. After some awkward silence, I reluctantly agreed. The Indians would have bows and arrows instead of guns. The game began. Everyone yelled, running around and shooting whatever we had. Sticks, fake rifles, plastic bows and arrows. Soon I was captured and stuck on the front porch. I didn't really care to play anymore. At least Pee-wee was happy. I sat down with my head on my knees. The game was so much better with our cousins and the bigger kids back at Grand Ronde. Back at home. Chapter 12. A different style of Cowboys and Indians. When we played Cowboys and Indians on the res, we made sure the Indians had guns and that they could win. One year, we waited most of the summer until the rains ended to sneak onto Yamhill Field, part of Old Man Jenkins' property. Jenkins was white and didn't like what he called savages on his land, so we always snuck in. We played right where the field met the tree line. Skipper and some of the older kids from school brought a bunch of lumber, nails, and hammers and started building a makeshift fort by the tree line. Cousin Harlan's boys, Leroy, Mark, and Chip, followed along with Pee-wee and me. "We want to play too," Leroy said. "Then make your own fort," Skipper said. We constructed lean-tos from branches on the forest floor. With everything built, we then divided into two groups. The Indians were the older boys, and the Cowboys were us younger ones. Different sized sticks became horses, bows, and rifles. Skipper outlined the stories. The Indians were minding their own business when some cowboys came to take over. "You must leave," Leroy said, aiming his big stick rifle at the Indians. "Nope," said Skipper, "not gonna happen." Then the fighting began. "I shot you. You're dead." "No, I'm not. It's just a flesh wound." "Hey, watch your stick. It almost hit me in the eye." And on it went. The yelping, the hollering, the laughing. The bang, bang of rifles. The thwish, whoosh, thunk of bows launching imaginary arrows and hitting the cowboys. The horses ran around the forts and the lean-tos. Finally, after everyone tired out, Skipper and his gang of Indians declared victory. Everyone jumped up and down, waving sticks in the air, yelling. Skipper suddenly raised his hand. We all stopped. "What?" Leroy asked. Skipper motioned to some trees nearby. One-Eyed Sam, Big Jim, and Pete were leaning against some nearby spruces. Pete, in his dark green flannel, pulled out a cigarette from his lips and blew smoke in our direction. The others just stared. They were the wounded war heroes from World War II. One-Eyed Sam lost his eye over in Guam fighting the Japanese. Big Jim came back with a crooked leg from the march in the Philippines. I couldn't remember what happened to Pete, but he had served on the USS South Dakota battleship. "Are we in trouble?" Leroy asked the man. It was Skipper's idea. Skipper slugged him in the shoulder. We waited. Their silence scared us. "Nope," Pete said, putting the cigarette back to his lips. "You did good," One-Eyed Sam said, and signaled "let's go" to the others. As they moved back into the tree, Big Jim remained behind. "You fought a good fight," said Big Jim. "Just remember to take the fort with you before Jenkins finds it." And then they disappeared below the hill. Later that evening, I stood in front of our old wood stove and told Daddy, Mama, and Chich about the warrior's visit. Mama's concern was elsewhere. "You know, Mr. Jenkins could have you all arrested," she said. "How many times have I told you not to go there?" Daddy sipped his coffee. "Oh, kid, I used to play there with Harlan. He never called the law. Threatened us, but never called." "You never know. He might someday." While Daddy and Mama discussed the pros and cons of playing in the field, I sat down on the floor next to Pee-wee. She added a deep blue puzzle piece to an ocean scene of palm trees and sand. Chich's sewing machine rumbled rhythmically in the corner. "I wonder why the warriors were watching us," Pee-wee said. "They never said anything until we noticed them." Chich pulled out her scissors and began cutting stray threads from a pair of pants she was hemming for Daddy. "When I was your age and going to the old elementary school, some older warriors watched me and my cousin making doll-sized villages near the school fence one day. We stole bits of fabric and thread and some buttons from the teacher's sewing box. Then we built miniature plank houses out of tiny cedar sticks and made horses out of bunch grass. We brought our cat-tail dolls from home. When it was all set, we pretended the tiny village was alive. The women dried river eels on racks. The men rode horses and played a stick game. One recess we came out and noticed the men stooping down behind the fence, staring at our village. They never said a word, but they were really having a look at it. The teacher started to walk over and shoo them away. She thought that they would scare us, but my cousin and I begged her not to. We wanted them to look. "Why did you stop the teacher from chasing them away?" I asked. Chich smiled. "Because we knew why they were looking at their village." "You did?" said Pee-wee. "Yes, because it reminded them of our ancestors' story and how life used to be before the white men came and forced us to move." Back on the porch at 58th Place, sitting and remembering all this, I felt further away from Grand Ronde than ever. I never lived on our res before the white settlers. I never knew what it was like to have horses or wear beaded dresses. And I didn't even live on the res now. I lived in a new neighborhood that didn't understand warriors or the history of my people. They didn't understand why my ancestors needed to win against cowboys. This neighborhood only knew what was told to them in movies, and television, and history books. That Indians always lose. Chapter 13, Budlong Blues. By Labor Day, everyone was ready for school to start. The parents, the kids, and everyone living on 58th Place. Sunshine covered the sidewalks as our neighborhood gang of 6, Keith, Addie, Anthony, Philip, Pee-wee, and me, headed towards Budlong Elementary School. It was just after the holiday weekend. The Santa Ana winds blew in like the Chinook winds back at home, only hotter. Instead of fall rains, 58th Place kept its sun and sported green grass, fresh trees, and colorful tropical flowers. Anthony, Keith, and I were entering the school as 5th graders. Anthony was in Miss Howard's class. Keith and I had Miss Davies. Pee-wee and Addie were also in different classrooms as 3rd graders, and Philip, being a 7th grader, left us at the entrance and headed towards John Muir Middle School, further down the block. "Too bad we're not in the same classroom," Addie said to Pee-wee, "but you'll love Miss Clark." "I can't believe Budlong has 2 classrooms for each grade," Pee-wee said. "Well, how many classrooms did your Indian school have?" Keith asked. 2, I answered. "That's the same as Budlong." No. 2 classrooms in the entire school," I replied. Back on the res, the Indian Agency School crowded grades 1 through 7 into the before the turn of the century schoolhouse. The younger kids, grade 1 through 4, occupied one room, and grades 5 through 7 crammed into the second. Pine trees outlined the schoolyard, and the fish-loaded creek flowed behind. The old fence had collapsed from a lack of maintenance, but the school's bright yellow exterior was painted by the students themselves. The rain puddles in the fall and the robins singing outside the windows in the spring made us all want to be outdoors instead of reading and writing. The school was nothing like that. Budlong Elementary stretched the length of a city block. The huge 3-story red brick building towered over the playground and was surrounded by a chain-link fence. There were 1 or 2 trees on the playground, but nothing we could climb. Worn-out asphalt, not grass, covered the ground with crackling yellow lines indicating where to play foursquare, hopscotch, and dodgeball. Rows of swings, monkey bars, and 2 lonely slides sat inside what looked like a giant sandbox. Addie walked alongside with Pee-wee, proudly swinging her metal Disney lunchbox. Pee-wee swung her paper bag lunch, just as proud. "This school is huge," she said. The students buzzed around, screaming and yelling, talking and running. Suddenly, a loud bell rang from the massive building. I jumped. Everyone froze. Another bell blared a minute later. Everyone scurried up to one of the yellow lines, filing up in rows by classroom, boys on one side and girls on the other. "Come on, Regina," said Keith, rushing past me. "We need to line up before we get in trouble." I scooted into the girls' line for Miss Davies' class across from him. Teachers poured out of the building, each heading straight for their students. Miss Davies, wearing a pretty powder blue dress with a poofy skirt and a wide white belt, strolled towards us. "Just follow the girl in front of you," whispered Keith. A girl put her finger to her mouth. "Shh, no talking in line." The day went by all right until Miss Davies assigned the line shusher to me as my classroom buddy. I wasn't crazy about that. The line shusher told me that her name was Alice and scrunched her nose every time she looked at me, and she only talked to her friends. I wanted to be with Keith instead. After all, he'd become my friend that summer, and we were in the same class. I stopped him on our way to recess. "What do you want to do at recess?" I asked him. Keith nervously looked at his sneakers. "I can't play with you, Regina," he said, grabbing his jacket from the classroom hook. I stared at him in shock. "Why?" He glanced at some boys waiting for him by the door. They giggled and pointed at us. "I just can't, okay?" Then he left. I stood there not knowing what to do. "Girls don't play with boys, silly," said Alice, who had annoyingly appeared at my side. "And you can't play with me either. I'm already late for Foursquare." She scampered out the door, snickering with her friends. Some classroom buddy she was. "Run along, Regina," Miss Davies said, urging me outside. But I didn't want to go outside. Apparently boys and girls didn't play with one another at the school here, break the rules and get teased. It was obvious Keith didn't want that. I finally went outside and looked for Pee-wee. She always made friends easier than I did. I didn't know if it was being older than my classmates because of my early birthday, or because, like Mama said, I thought about things a lot. Sure enough, I found Pee-wee laughing and jumping rope with a few girls from her class. I ended up strolling along the perimeter of the playground. I watched boys bounce a ball against a large wall and girls hopping front and back on hopscotch squares. I stood nearby wondering if they'd invite me to join, but they didn't. Life at Budlong Elementary was not like 58th Place, and not at all like life back home. No trees, no creek, no robins, no playing with anyone you want to, and lots of other rules that I didn't understand. I wasn't sure if I'd ever figure out how to live there. Chapter 14, Miss Elsie's House. After school, Mama and Miss Elsie waited by the school gate. When I asked Keith why kids call his mama Miss Elsie and not Mrs. Bates, he said it was just something that they did back in Arkansas. As we all turned onto 58th Place, we waved goodbye to the Hernandez brothers and then continued to Miss Elsie's and Mr. Bates' house. Dozens of rose bushes, all perfectly arranged, filled the front yard. Yellow ones, red ones, big bright pink ones. Circling the concrete porch were pansies and multicolored snapdragons. "Do you have a vegetable garden, too?" I asked Miss Elsie. "No, I don't grow vegetables, just flowers," she said, smiling proudly. She turned to Mama. "Kate, would you and the girls like to come inside, and we can have a cup of coffee?" Would I ever, I thought. I screamed inside with happiness when Mama said yes. I hadn't been inside anyone's house since we had moved to 58th Place. Like Addie, at our house the first day we met, my curiosity was piqued to see how the Bates family lived. Even though their house didn't look bigger than ours, I could tell that it was nicer just from the outside. And as soon as I walked inside, I saw how right I was. Us kids settled in the family room, eating ham and cheese sandwiches off a pretty plate on top of a glass coffee table. Miss Elsie pulled the lacy curtain back, which let sunlight sparkle through the glass vases full of cut roses. Professional family pictures lined the walls, along with paintings of outdoor scenery. I could tell Mr. Bates had a good job at the post office. I hoped Daddy would get one too after he finished school. Miss Elsie also had a special room no one could enter. And there, white plush couches with matching chairs, all covered in plastic, sat next to matching brown end tables, holding shiny brass lamps with plastic-covered white lampshades. Very fancy. "Has anyone ever sat in that room?" I asked. "Yeah," Keith said, "at Christmas and New Year's." Miss Elsie turned on the radio. Music filled the house while she and Mama drank coffee from matching cups and talked in the kitchen. "Oh, how the Platters can sing," I heard Miss Elsie say. "They do sound nice," Mama said. "Mama, can we go out back?" Kevin shouted into the kitchen. "Yes, just remember to wipe your feet if you have to come back in for any reason." There definitely wasn't room for a garden behind the house. A brightly colored swing set with 2 swings, a teeter-totter, a slide, and a hanging bar filled the space. Pee-wee and I loved playing on that swing set. We definitely weren't ready to go back to our side of the street when Mama stuck her head out to say we needed to head home. When we left, Miss Elsie was cooking pork chops for dinner. My mouth watered, but their house was not our house. Chapter 15, Pork Chops for Dinner. After leaving Miss Elsie's house, I couldn't look at ours the same way. The patchy grass and empty flower bed sometimes looked worse than it had that morning. "Mama, can we have flowers too?" I asked. "No money for that right now, Regina," Mom said. "Maybe in the spring." On our concrete porch, a chipped metal rocker sat alone. Mama had found it near a trash can and made Daddy bring it home. She wanted to sit outside with her coffee and cigarette in the morning. The inside of the house didn't have the beauty of Miss Elsie's either. The couch, Addie had once complained, now had white doilies that Chich had crocheted to hide the frayed armrests. Mama had added unmatched chairs and side tables from the Salvation Army store. Chich had made curtains from a big bolt of muslin fabric that Mama had found on sale in another store. The house looked better than when we moved in, but that wasn't saying much. That night, fried bologna and potatoes were served at dinner, a staple at mealtime. "Why don't we have knickknacks like Miss Elsie's house?" I asked, pushing my food around. "And how come we don't ever have pork chops for dinner?" "Because pork chops cost money, Regina. Be thankful we're eating this." Mama pressed her lips together. Chich sipped her coffee. Daddy changed the subject. "Hey, did I tell you that I got top grades in my class?" Daddy had started his trade schooling a month before Pee-wee and I entered Budlong. He took the number 5 bus from Western Ave to Westchester, some 2 towns away. He brought home big red books and tons of papers, and Mama had saved enough money to buy him some special pencils and drafting tools. If I keep doing this well, I'll end up being top of my class at graduation. "Really?" I said. "That's good, Tanasman," said Chich. "Does that mean when you graduate, we'll be able to buy pork chops for dinner?" Pee-wee asked, enjoying her potatoes with ketchup. "We can buy a whole pig if we want to," Daddy said. Pee-wee and I laughed. "What would we do with a pig?" Mama murmured. "And where on earth would we put it?" "Kate, it's a joke." "Well, I'm not laughing," she said, as she pushed herself away from the table. She stacked the plates in the sink and headed to their bedroom. Daddy followed. "Mama's upset," Pee-wee said. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, Quaim, your mom is just tired. That's all. Why don't you and your sister go into the living room? Draw some pretty pictures so that we can put them on the wall. I'll work on a puzzle. Then I can glue the pieces together and hang it up. Chich nodded. Mama would like that. Suddenly Chich held her chest. From her apron pocket, she pulled out the small medicine bottle with her heart pills. She placed a tiny white one under her tongue and closed her eyes. Are you all right? I asked. Want me to get Daddy? Chich shook her head. She slowly got up to go to her bedroom. She had been taking those pills more often than usual since we moved to Los Angeles. Pee-wee worked on her puzzle while I outlined a picture of our old farmhouse in black crayon. Voices seeped out from Mama and Daddy's bedroom. It was muffled, but I could hear ugly house and wanna go home. Back on the res, our farmhouse wasn't glamorous either, but it was comfy. Chich's colorful quilts draped over the homemade furniture Chop had built. He'd carved eagles and bears into the legs of the table. I loved to watch him work, but I liked sewing with Chich the best. Our walls there were covered with pictures I made at school and old black and white photos of family. One photograph showed Chup in a Grand Ronde band uniform holding a bighorn with other Indians. A hunting rifle with a detailed carving on the stock had also hung on the wall with honor. The house had almost always smelled of baking bread, huckleberries or blackberry pies, and stews. The old wooden stove churned up enough heat to keep everyone warm. I knew we were poor in Grand Ronde, but I hadn't felt poor. I felt proud. But I didn't feel that way on 58th Place. Chapter 16. Halloween Carnival. By October, walking to school was a breeze. Our group stopped at every street corner and waited for the crossing guards' permission to go across busy Normandy Boulevard. Then we'd head all the way down to Budlong Avenue to arrive at school. We could do it blindfolded. All everyone talked about at school was Halloween and the upcoming carnival. I couldn't say I understood all the excitement, because our school back home had never had one. Then again, we didn't celebrate Halloween. Now the big day had arrived, and I'd soon find out myself. What's that lady doing? I asked Keith as we walked into the school playground. A woman was bent down, painting squares within an oval on the pavement near the cafeteria. Grown-ups, parents or otherwise, didn't usually come to school. As far as I know, they certainly weren't allowed to paint on the playground. That looked strange. She's part of the PTA, getting ready for the cakewalk, Keith said. What's the cakewalk? It's one of the carnival games. It's a big deal. You walk around the oval while music plays. When it stops, you have to stand on a square. Then they draw a number. If you're standing on it, you win a cake. Like birthday cakes? Pee-wee asked, the Halloween birthday girl. All kinds of cakes, Addie said. That explained why Mrs. Shapiro, the PTA chair, had asked Mama and Chich if they could each bake a cake. Hammering echoed through the playground. Other parents built plywood booths near the school cafeteria. Did you have a Halloween carnival at your old school? Asked Addie. Nope, said Pee-wee, but I'm excited for this one. We never celebrated Halloween on our reservation, I said. More parents arrived to decorate already constructed booths with black and orange crepe paper and signs. Even though I still couldn't figure out the real source of the excitement, I had noticed an army of kids. All of the kids seemed to care about was their Halloween costumes and finding out what everyone else was going to wear. I'm going to dress up as the Lone Ranger, Keith said. Why don't you come as Tonto? Keith had told me that the Lone Ranger was one of his favorite television shows. I wasn't familiar with the Lone Ranger or Tonto, seeing as we didn't own a television. But I said okay. Tonto was supposed to be an Indian on the show. I was an Indian. Easiest costume ever. Wrong. I told you I wanted to be Tonto, an Indian, I said later that afternoon as Chich wound my long braids into a bun. No, she replied. Mama had asked Chich to create costumes for Pee-wee and me to wear for the carnival. She'd made us each red yarn wigs to wear on our head with white aprons to wear over dresses we already had, so we'd look like these Raggedy Ann dolls we'd seen in the store. But Keith wants me to be Tonto. He's dressing up as the Lone Ranger. I can't be Tonto as I go as a doll. Is that so? Still no. Why not? I huffed. Because you're already an Indian, she said. You don't need to parade as one. Ouch. I remembered Chich's story about her grandmother and the white people staring at her like a circus act. But this would be different. I'd be dressing up as a TV character. I'm not a real Indian. But it wasn't different to Chich. Just like those white people who watched my grandmother dance and knew nothing about her culture or traditional dress, people around here don't know anything about Umpqua or any other tribes. They only see white actors dressed up to play Indians on movies and TV shows. None of that is real." She paused and looked at me. "I want you to enjoy the carnival with your friends, but I want you to respect your family and culture, too." Then she nodded for Pee-wee and me to get ready. We put on our dresses and the aprons that Chich had made. Then she put the yarn wigs on our heads. Mama followed her with makeup, drawing a few dark brown lines under our eyes to make large eyelashes. Next, she put some red rouge on our cheeks, and finally she painted our lips with her blue flame red lipstick. Reluctantly, I trailed behind as my family entered the playground that afternoon. The gray skies and winds that hung around that morning gave their ways to sun and a light breeze. Elvis Presley's All Shook Up blasted from tall black speakers. Tons of bright crepe paper waved from colorful blue booths full of activities. My classmate Richard, dressed as Superman, threw darts at balloons attached to a plywood booth. Each balloon held a strip of paper that listed the prize he won. He received a little sawdust-filled stuffed elephant. Keith appeared in front of me in his white cowboy hat, black mask, and a scarf folded around his neck. He folded his arm. "You told me that you were coming as Tonto. I wanted to, but Chich said no." "Raggedy Ann?" "Mama made me." I sighed. Keith turned and headed over to the fishbowl booth. I saw him try to toss ping-pong balls into glass bowls to win a goldfish, but my nose led me to the table filled with sacks of buttery popcorn, where I picked up one for each Pee-wee and me. Pee-wee then followed Mama and Daddy to the auction booth. Mama picked up a semi-new lamp for the table for 50 cents. Daddy found a brand new lock wrench for the bargain price of $2. The four of us gathered together when Chich took her chance at the cakewalk. Chich gave her ticket to one of the PTA moms and stepped onto a square. Kids and parents stood on the remaining squares. Then the music started and everyone walked around the oval. When the music stopped, Chich ended up on the square marked 3. The woman dipped her hand inside a box and pulled out number 3. Pee-wee and I cheered, Mama clapped, and Chich received her prize. Only it was the very cake that she had made the day before. Daddy laughed. "At least we'll know that it will taste good." After, Pee-wee and I played some games ourselves, and our family then headed home for dinner and to have Chich's prize as Pee-wee's birthday cake. I munched on a caramel-covered apple on a stick as we walked. Keith had given me the goldfish in a bag he'd won to say that he understood about the costume. It was the best time of my life since moving to 58th Place. Then came Halloween night. And we'll pick up there tomorrow to find out what happens in Chapter 17, Trick or Treat. We've been reading Indian No More by Charlene Willing McManis with Traci Sorell. This book is published by Lee & Low Books. Once again, my name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!